Hi, Simon. It's nice to meet you here.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So we will place some stories of yours, your biography, about your journey on this episode, and I just give you the seat, give you the how to say. I'll give you the first place, the audience. Let's just talk. Tell me a bit, please, about your career and your education, maybe from the young age. So, what steered you in this world, and what were you most interested in learning, starting from your as early as you were?
So I first started working with computers back when the ZX81 came out. So I was at school then. I didn't have one. My friend had one, and I used to go round to his house to help him program it and do things. And we used to get programs from magazines and type them in, and then play little games on it that you could get. And then I got my own computer, and my dad decided to get a something called a Sharp. Had a monitor that was a green monitor and a cassette on the side. It had sort of a rudimentary operating system, and you had to put a tape in and wait for 5 minutes for the operating system to load so that you could actually use it. And the first things that I used to do on that, I was interested in astronomy, and I did a little a program with like the planets going around the sun, and the cycles of the moon and stuff. The graphics were not very good, so it had, for each character there were 4 little squares, and depending on what character you chose, and 1 or 2 of the squares on and off. So it wasn't a straightforward thing to do that. And then I put that into there's a local planetarium, and I put that into the planetarium. And then there were some people there that kind of went, "Oh, the graphics are horrible on that. It's like so silly." But it's just like, actually, it took quite a lot of time to do it. And I've always been interested in programming. And at the time, there was a local in the UK, the biggest supplier of credit cards was a company called JCC, Joint Credit Card Company, and their head office is in my sort of hometown, Southend, in the UK. And I really wanted to get in there, and I managed to fail some of my exams. I stayed on at school and didn't do the work that I should have done, and managed to. At the end of school, I got an O level in maths, and then after 2 years, I got an A, and then after 2 years, I took my advanced level, A level, and managed to get an O level equivalent of grade C. So I'd actually gone backwards by 2 grades in the 2 years. So yeah, not really what I intended. And then a careers officer told me that I'd never get in. I wouldn't be a programmer there. And then I applied for a job in operations. So that was working shift, with the goal of getting into the company and then being able to transfer. And yeah, I did that. So I worked on shift for 10 months, and then joined a applications programming, got it applied internally, got the position. And then joined with 12 or 13 of us, and I was the only one that went into systems programming. So rather than doing the applications, we'd spent sort of 3 months learning COBOL at the time. That's what they used. And then I never used COBOL again. And I went into systems programming, and that's all about installing software on mainframes and managing the application on the mainframes that we were. So dealing with credit card transactions and making sure that everything got routed to the right place. So that's where I started, and then went into automation. So system state management. So years later, I learned a little bit about Kubernetes and the way that it works and starts and stops things.
It makes the secure payments, right?
Yes. Yeah. At one point, probably about 80% of the transaction, any credit card transaction that was done wherever the card originated. So if you came over to here and did a credit card transaction, it would be routed through to wherever it needed to go around the world through either Visa, MasterCard, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, probably about 80% of the transactions that are done in the UK at some point went through pieces of my code. So I did end up doing some coding, but it was several years later. Then I got made redundant from there. Well, I should say I took voluntary redundancy and set up my own business. And that was in, I'd been interested in personal development. So I was very interested in all sorts of personal development. And I started up with I started up a business that was running a course for personal development, and stayed in the business too long. So I was very good at doing the presentation, but not so good at doing the sales. So yeah, I managed to get kind of about half a dozen, not even that, half a dozen people to join my courses, and then I moved into sales. So I thought, okay, my weak area is sales. Let's try and build up my ability to do sales. I then went into a commission-only sales and sold one person in 3 months, and that was on an offer. So I only got I think I got about £50 or something like that. In fact, I don't even think I got that. I think I got about £20 in 3 months. So I switched and I went to account management. So then, rather than selling the clients, I was managing them once they were clients. And I did that for a few years, and then went back into an IT role. Became a manager of a small company dealing with operations manager, and then various roles since then. So some of it was in healthcare, analytics, dealing with data. So we processed the data that the government produce for all hospital visits, and kind of understood what the different hospital doctors and nurses were. So I dealt with that for a little while, and then ending up in the last 5 years working for a company that did MVPs for small businesses as a full stack developer. So and then got made redundant from that in February this year, and decided that with everything going on with AI, that what I needed to do was kind of mix my skills up. Full stack was great, but it's, with AI coming along, I'm 11 years out of from retirement. I thought, I'm never going to keep a job for 11 years with AI the way it is. I'm going to need to upskill. I then started to look more seriously into AI, and about 3 or 4 weeks after it came out, I discovered Claude Code and have done deep dive into that ever since. So I'm almost exclusively using Claude Code now.
Yeah, that's impressive. Mentioning a few times about being redundant and switching careers, switching gears. It's
I've had the privilege of being made redundant or taking redundancy 7 times.
I see.
And it's just, one of the things that I think it was early on. Somebody had said to me, or I came across some personal development that said about, if you can automate yourself out of a job, or, make it easier to do your job, you've got a job for life. And I tell you that it's not always true. Sometimes they just go, okay, thanks, bye.
So, yeah, I see. I think I want to talk about personal development in this episode, actually, and different sides of it, and what I have in mind also connected with AI. So first, I want to just tell you about credit cards, because in my earlier years in entrepreneurship, we have a travel agency, and the customers, they mailed us their credit cards, and we have special money machine that we put their credit card and how much they should pay. And we took this payment. For me, it looked like a fantastic job. So the only worry was that afterwards they can maybe put a claim that we charged more or they didn't authorize it. So it was completely unknown for me. And different people, even from the bank here, some person came to me, gave us this machine, and said that he will give us low commission, but we need to give some money back to him for this.
Right.
So
okay.
it was kind of very strange situations in my early entrepreneurship, and also in my younger years of being a child. My parents, my father was one of the first programmers in Kiev. My mother worked in the Institute of Automation, and also we had these paper things they put in the large machines and all these cassettes.
Yep.
And so calculators were also you put some programs and you put this inside for some
punch cards. Yeah.
Yes.
That's how it was when I started in the operations team. So I was in charge of putting the tapes onto the drives, and they used to load all of the data in there. So obviously we're creating credit card statements and stuff like that. So it was loading paper onto printers, loading the cassettes into the drives. It was a 24-hour thing. So, you know, you did sort of days, evenings, overnight. Yeah, so it was fun.
What about debugging? How did it go?
From that side of things, you were just managing the operation. So you're just making sure that when it needed to print, there was paper on the printer. You know, if it needed a particular, there would be a console similar to a console that you get on your browser, but it would come up with a message to say, you know, load so and so tape, and then you'd have to go through all of the tapes, find the particular tape, and then load it in and kind of reel it around. And then it, you know, if you'd seen the old big reel tapes, it would just kind of spool onto another one, and then it would spool back on, and then you'd take it off and put it back on the rack, and then get another one.
Yeah.
And then we started to do cassettes. So there was a more kind of, rather than kind of an open reel tape, it was more of a cassette tape, and they were kind of, and then they went into like a big silo thing. There was a dome with an arm that kind of grabbed the tape and loaded it and all the rest of it. So yeah, it was that was interesting. And then when I started to go into sort of systems programming, you know, I was doing things like writing. So, you know, nowadays you've got a wizard, an install wizard. Well, you didn't have that. You got given a tape. You had to take it to the operations team. You loaded it onto something. You pushed it into the memory, and then you had to, you know, in one case, I had to write some machine language to make it so that an exit would work. You know, so it did something, whatever it needed to do. I mean, they had sort of instructions, but you know, you had to manually install the software to get it to work, and then
I would say feed the software into the machine, right?
Literally, it was, you know, you downloaded it and then you had to wire it up using code, you know, creating code yourself to load it, you know, to make it so that it worked. So yeah, that was interesting. I then went into, so one of the big problems that the company had was downtime. So if something went wrong with the mainframe and we couldn't process credit cards, then, you know, half an hour of outage was hundreds of thousands of pounds. So we started a process of automating the startup of the mainframe, and I was in charge of that. And we used some software, which was the software that I just talked about, and we kind of pushed the boundaries of that software to a point at which I stood at a conference in front of about 400 people and talked to them about the way that we were actually doing the whole process, because most of the people were just using programs. So, you know, if a program wasn't started, then they'd start the program. But we'd actually used it to create and manage network resources. So we were actually monitoring the state of the whole machine and all of the things that were required to make it so that the application worked, and make sure that they were actually working. And that wasn't something that people were doing. So the company that had the software said, Simon, can you come and talk at this conference? So yeah, that was interesting. I think I was about 21 or 22 at that point.
How many years ago was it?
So I'm 57 now. Quite a few years ago. Nearly 35 years ago.
So I would like to delve to dive more into the personal development things, maybe you can just tell a bit more about your concept, how you put your efforts on your own personal development, maybe your books or authors or maybe systems that you are following, and what is your take on it?
Yeah. So I have gone into, over the years, I've probably read thousands of personal development, business development books, all sorts of things on various subjects, from spirituality to productivity to strategy to sales to copywriting, all sorts.
Who are your favorites? Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, and so early on, I think I was quite influenced by Stephen Covey, The Seven Habits.
Me too.
Just a second. Somebody at the door. Wait a minute. Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
One second. I will bring this book. We have this book in Ukrainian.
Yeah.
Stephen Covey. And also another book of Stephen Covey, Principle-Centric Leadership or Management Leadership. Yes. And the Speed of Trust by his son, Stephen Covey Jr. So it's this book.
Yeah, the principle-centered leadership, I think, was a big influence on me. So I always sort of thought about, way back when I first started doing the systems programming, I was looking at.
I will not.
Yeah, I got a book on AI that was way back. So that would have been 40 years ago. So that was talking about a Logica, and I can't even remember what it was. I gave it away to somebody actually that was doing a university course, probably about 20 years ago, because it was actually part of their curriculum. And I thought, well, I'm not using it, so they may as well use it. So yeah, I just I tried to do lots and lots of different things, lots of trying to get inspiration from lots of places. I've always been interested in writing stories, so that goes even further back. So when I was in infant school, they started an initiative where they did phonic spelling. So I would have been probably about 5. And as far as I can remember, I was pretty good. And then that was for 2 years. And then they closed the initiative down. So I think I was 5, and then I got to about 7. And they said, all of those words that we told you, that's not how you spell them. They're done. That's not right. And then it just completely mucked me up. So I was not very good. So I was actually in a remedial class for English. I was very good with maths, a remedial class for English when I started in my senior school. And then by the time I ended my senior school, I was in set 1 for both maths and English. And then I kind of stayed on. But I was always slow at writing. But I loved stories. I loved... So my favourite author is Brandon Sanderson, a science fiction writer, and he did a podcast called Writing Excuses, and there's probably, 500, 600 of them. They were only, so he did it with a team of writers, and they just talked about various topics on writing, like introducing characters, plots, and also different thing each week. And I used to listen to that because I used to love the idea that maybe one day I'd write a book. I haven't done. I have written stories. I've tried to write some stories, but it's just like exploring different things. It's extending your mind. It's trying different things. It's to me that is personal development. I think now I'm leaning into more things that I'm stronger at. But at the same, like the programming, I think that the programming, the thing that I love about the programming is that you can create something. So one of the best programs that I wrote, I was pretty much working on my own, and it was a system that dynamically changed depending on the answers that you answered, and sort of went through various paths. And they, after a little while, they said they needed a new functionality. And the way that I'd architected it. So if you kind of imagine kind of layers, I tweaked a little thing right down in the middle of the program, right at the very, very core. And so that it was used by lots of things, and then tweaked something on the outside, and then all the layers in between used it. So to add the functionality, it was just like a couple of lines of code right in the middle of the application, and then just where it needed to kind of surface, just a couple of lines of code in three or four places, and then the whole of the application had a different functionality. And that to me, I love that art of creating a structure that is not only it's rigid in a way, almost like a fractal. If you think of a fractal can be created on a simple rule, but actually it can be quite complex when you view it from a distance. So it's kind of getting that idea where I find it wonderful that you can create something that's rigid, but then use it in different ways to make it so that it's incredibly flexible. So I love that side of things, which is why I've kind of lent into the Claude Code thing, because my initial experience with Claude Code was, rather I'd say, okay, let's take it back a few months. I'm always amazed at how little you can do within an afternoon of coding. And that always frustrated me, that I'd got this idea of this is what I wanted to create, and then the actual amount that I can do in an afternoon or in a day, it always seemed to be quite limiting. And then my initial experience with Claude Code was coding at the speed that my mind works, and that was like a complete revolution for me. I could envisage something, I could give the AI some instructions, and within hours, or an hour, suddenly you've got something that resembled what you had in mind in the first place. And structurally, it was doing the things. I'm like I said, I'm quite structural. I like structure. I like to do something in the right way. And and the first thing that I did, actually, I realized that I'd done it wrong. And I said to AI, okay, I've given you the wrong instruction. I need you to change it like this. I need you to change it into this. And within half an hour, it had done it. And I just went, wow, this is a tool where I can really see myself using it and understanding it. And then personal development wise, I think one key philosophy that I have is that I'm wrong, and I've got strong beliefs, and I'm always willing to consider that those beliefs may not be correct. And some of the posts that I've done recently on LinkedIn, I've had people kind of, no, you've got to do it like this. No, that's wrong. No, well, when is it wrong? Is it wrong? And, you've got to be flexible. Sometimes it might not be wrong. So it's being open to the possibility that actually maybe your understanding is not correct. And that's the key to personal growth. Because if you think you know it all, there's nowhere to grow. And if you ever been gone to university, or you've done any study of a subject, you can start off with, maybe you start off at school with a rudimental elements, and most of those things that you're taught are wrong, and then you build up another layer, and most of those things, your universe expands, your knowledge of the subject expands, and most of those things are wrong. And then you build another layer, and you go deeper, and you go deeper, and you go deeper, and you go deeper, and every time you come, every time you try and get to a point where you know something, you realize that you only know the tiniest part of that subject. And you might be the leading expert in the world on that subject, but actually you know a tiny, tiny part of the whole subject. So again, it's a lot of the things that I sort of try and kind of be open to is, okay, I've got a view that I'm doing the right thing, but I'm open to the fact that maybe there's another way of doing it, and that I may be wrong, and actually there may be a much easier way of doing it. And that has led me with Claude Code to get into things like that, where I've kind of, again, with both in the AAA, and I put something out a little while ago where I said I was humbled by AI because I went off and I know how to do it. I know how you should do this, but just do it like this. You know, I spent a lot of time kind of making it so that it did this. And then after probably a week and a few 100,000 lines of code, it sort of did what I wanted. I cut down the functionality a bit to make it so that it's like an MVP, and you know, it did roughly what I wanted, but it was still a fair way out. And then actually doing something else, I tried to do something with agents, and this system was around content, and I managed to create better content by not using any code and just doing it with agents. And then I started to think, right, okay, maybe this isn't the right way of doing it. And I then said, right, okay, I've got an I've got an API on this with this version, and I've got the content, fantastic content. How can I make it so that this fantastic content can have an AI, and what do I need to do? And within 1,000 lines of code, it had created an AI, an API a UI that did too many abbreviations, I know.
UI is user interface.
User interface. It had created a user interface that did 90% of the functionality that I wanted. And then I said, right, okay, so I'm 90% of the way there, and I've got like 100th of the code. Where did I go wrong? Look at the first commits that I did. Look at my first instructions, and where was it that I went wrong? And it said right at the very, very beginning, you went wrong. And what did I do? I said, I know how to do it because I know everything. And in reality, actually, I know how to do, you know, I'm a full stack developer, but I've done React, I've done Next, I've done TypeScript, and pretty much that's what I've used. Node.js on the back end. So I only know sort of I only know one way of doing things. And in this particular case, there was better ways of doing it. And if I just got out the way of AI, it knows everything that there is. So it could suggest a better way of doing things. And if I just let it, it could do it in 100 lines of code in an hour. It took 10 minutes to write it instead of a week of work trying to make it follow my plan. So, you know, it's humbling because you think you know everything, but actually you don't. You don't know everything at all. You know a little tiny bit of a huge subject. So I'm always wary about kind of saying, this is the way to do it. I'm always, because I think in certain circumstances that might be correct, but in other circumstances it might not be.
Yeah, Simon. So that's a lot of things that you shared in this speech. Personal development and being wrong, and the advantages of using cloud computing and debugging and realizing your deep ambitions and your aspirations about programming and software that you had to spend weeks on end. That your afternoon of programming could squeeze to 10 minutes or maybe 1 minute of talking to a Claude and making proper prompts for it to give you nice software that you can use as MVP for your startup. So maybe you have ideas for your MVPs for the next SaaS, or what else? You can share yours. Maybe I can share mine.
Yeah, I will just say where this has come from, because it's interesting where it's come from. So some of the things that I had when I was working as a member of staff in an organization, and the organization were making crazy decisions, and the decisions just didn't make any sense. And then you know like the thing about climbing the mountain, you know, and reaching your goal, and as you go up and you get to a peak, and then you realize that there's another mountain that's bigger, further on. And that's how I went. I went up this mountain and I got into management, and I got to that point, and then I realized that they weren't looking from the point that I was. They were looking from this high up place. And from this high up place, the decisions they were making made perfect sense. It's just because I didn't have that vision, because I didn't have that perspective, I didn't realize that actually, to me, they just didn't make sense. And you had people, there were people crying out to do something in the business. But then when you took a step back and you looked at it from the owner of the business's point of view, it was perfectly logical what she was doing. It was absolutely, the way that she was managing the business was perfect. It's just that nobody else could see it because they weren't looking at it from her point of view.
Yeah.
So it's just, I feel like it is a lot of perspective and stuff like that. In terms of some of the stuff that I'm doing at the moment, I'm doing a lot of client work, and I can't show some of that. I might be able to show some things. 2 seconds, and let me get.
Yeah, you can.
So part of some of the stuff that I wanted to do, I've been looking to do. I haven't managed to get to a point where this is finished, so this is a work in progress. But one of the things that I wanted to do was, I'm interested in intermittent fasting and meal planning, specifically. And I've tried to do it for a number of years, and I've always, if you get a recipe book, it's got a load of recipes in it, but it's not that easy to translate that into, well, this is how I'm planning my week. These are the things that I'm going to do, and these are the ingredients I want in a shopping list. So I had the idea of trying to create a meal planning app that actually allowed us to do that. I'm realizing that's probably quite small. Should I blow that up? And one of the things that I come across was the concept of a product requirements document. And there's a number of things out there that give you sort of templates to create it. And one of the things that I found is that Claude Code understands product requirement document. You don't need to give it instructions of what that is. You can just say, give me a product requirements document for this. And it's quite happy to create, it just creates it. So I found that the prescriptive methods of, again, working on that thing, if you're telling it what to do, then you are probably going down the wrong route. You want to make it so that it can make the best decision, and you want to delay things as much as possible until you know what it is that you're trying to achieve. So this is this is the kind of requirements document that I came up with for this project. And as you can see, there's things where I've simplified the structure and created sub-agents and other bits and pieces where I tried other things to try and change the way that I'm doing things and change the way that it works. But here you've got this document, and then I've broken it into phases. And the idea of a phase is that at the end of the phase, you've got a program that works. So this was actually when I was so some of the things that I was looking at was monorepo, hexadecimal architecture, hexagonal architecture. So the idea of hexagonal architecture is that you've got a core of business logic that's sitting in the middle, that's got no dependencies on anything outside it, and you're doing pure business logic in there. It's not dependent on anything else, so it's purely the functionality that needs to take place. And then what you do is kind of bolt things onto it to facilitate certain functionality. So whether that is a UI, whether that's a database, whether that's whatever it is. And the idea is that if you plugged in a database, then the core might know that it's persisted, but it doesn't know how it's persisted. So if you wanted to change it to a different type of database, all you do is just change the interface that you're using for the database, and then it's persisting to a different endpoint. Likewise, in one of the other programs that I did, I had the option to do it on as a command line interface. So you can type in and you can do a command and it would do whatever it needed to do. And then I realized it would be a good idea to have an API. So I created an API for it. And then I realized it would be better to have it as a UI or a web app. So I created a web app. But you could still do all of the other functionality. So you could still do it on the command line, or you could still do it as an API. So I found that as a really flexible way of doing things. I know Next.js, so I chose Next.js, and this is one of those ones early on where I've so you see here where it's crossed out architecture. I've gone for a more simplified server pattern because what I found was that I was creating code and again trying to force it down a route which was taking too long. We can talk about TDD, test-driven development, and AI. There's pundits out there that are kind of screaming that test-driven development needs to be done in a certain way. With AI, I question whether it does, because if you try it in a strict way, it takes 10 times longer to do anything than if you just let AI do it.
Yeah, that's great advice, Simon. So what are the final results? Do you have some interface already, or it is just in the process?
I'm not even sure what state this is in. Crumbs.
When will we see MVP?
When will we see an MVP? Let's see what we've got here.
So you have so much enthusiasm about the program, so I'm sure that you thought over it and it will be useful for many people.
Sorry?
It will be useful for many people, this software?
I think if you're into intermittent fasting,
I know about it from many people, and my favorite authors are also using it, for like Peter Attia about longevity. So he mentions 3 times of calorie restrictions. Is just making your portions less, or making your portions less, or making all the choice of products with less calories, or just use intermittent fasting to compress the time that you are eating, like to the window of 6 hours, or to 10 hours, or to 3 hours, or even to taking meal only once per day.
OMAD. So again, people think, that you can only be, 3 meals a day, and you big meal in the morning, or you have dinner in the evening, or whatever. You're brought up with a certain viewpoint, and really, what I'm saying is, well, why is that true? Why is that the case? Because you've got people that are sitting there and doing intermittent fasting, that are having 2 meals a day. 8 hours apart, and they've got loads of health benefits from doing that, or 6 hours apart, or there's other people that are doing it and they're doing 1 meal a day, and the meal's over an hour, so they're not kind of eating quickly, they're taking their time, and over an hour they're having all of their calories for the day, and it's just a different way of doing things. And there's health benefits from doing it, but maybe it doesn't work for everybody. Maybe it's not right for you. Maybe it's, maybe you've got a health problem that makes it that's not the correct way of doing things. So it's all of these things. You can go into it, but Is it
Simon,
right?
Simon, I think that we will maybe have a few more minutes, and
Okay.
I want to share you. Maybe we can discuss a bit deeper about this concept. But I want to do something like you do for this intermittent fasting. But my ideas is around personal development. When the chatbot or AI agent speaks to you over the day with quite a random questions, but the themes will be limited. Like you have randomized this, how to say, intermittent fasting. I want to use informational bits that go to you with questions, videos, actions, quotes, that each day you have one theme. And the themes are split over the week in special sequence. So we have from Monday to Saturday sequence, and then next week again, next sequence, and each day is devoted to some theme, like to spirituality or to healthy food or exercising or intellectual development or emotional development. And we take into the focus one book or one author. This is expert. So I found from 16 to 18 books on 6 areas. So together it will be about like a little bit more than 100 books that you can think about and meditate upon and act upon like each day with simple tasks. So I want to use AI not only to get content from the books, and each book should be tied to the philosophy of stoicism or making your life like more brave, more justice, more braveness, more moderateness, and more wisdom. So 4 principles. And each book is tied to this, and you learn the books, you act, and then it should be tied also to each individual. That at the beginning of the program, we have like you have this special requirements or initial manifesto. So I want to each person to answer maybe 20 to maybe 50 questions about his goals, his life, his advantages, and something else, so that each day, each of the piece of information is adjusted to his situation. So what do you think? Is this possible to realize with AI, and maybe you can take your put your hand on it in some way?
So in terms of the information, what have you got? Have you got the straight books, or have you got your
like this, like books,
interpretation of the book? You know, have you got a summary of? Yeah,
summaries. Just summaries.
Yeah.
I asked the Google Notebook to make podcast episodes on each book in connection with ancient philosophy, and it did a fantastic job. Job of, and then ask for quotes, for actions, for questions. So it looks like each day is filled with very robust and interesting information. And each day you start, you don't know which book it will be, but you know it will be on spirituality. This day is about creativity. This day is about your entrepreneurial skills. So 6. So I think that it could be a bit random, but inspiring and
yes,
with self-development. So what do you think? Can be? So I want to possibly also add this to my podcast. So these things. And what do you think about it?
Obviously, well, yeah, we've briefly spoken about it before, and I think it's a great idea. Obviously you can take the knowledge and you can put that into a vector store or rag store, and put the data in so that you can retrieve it, so that you can have kind of, right, okay, if you talk about a particular subject, then it pulls out references to that particular topic. You can easily index the topics to make it so that you've got a bank of whatever it is, 100,000 topics, so that you can kind of either randomize a route through it, or you can do things so you've got paths through the content. And if somebody kind of, do you resonate with this content, or do you not resonate with this? Are you liking this, or are you not so keen on it? can you kind of maneuver to a slightly different path to make it so that you're bringing aspects to that person that they're more interested in, and so I think you could definitely make something that could be very tailored to an individual's requirements or an individual's experience. The experience that they want.
I will share with you once I have some ready materials and some also interested people. I will put it together and show it to you for your inspection. Okay. And what about the screen? So maybe we can have like a couple more minutes and finish around this up. And can you explain this screen and your meal planner?
Yeah. So this is a dashboard. So things like amazing stuff. Pepper, I think you'll find, is something along the lines of is one of these other things. I mean, like that might be the same as that one. And obviously 6 calories is not very big. So, yeah, and then basically you're just putting the meals in there. And what it should do is, actually, let's see whether that works. Okay, so there you go. It populates it and generates it. And then you can go in and look at the nutrition. I don't think I've saved that, so that may not do it. So you can look at what your requirements are, and you can look and see whether it's meeting your requirements. So this was the whole thing, and then the idea was to make it so that it creates. So what it does is it looks at the meal plan that you've got, and then creates. Well, this is what you'd need in order to do it. And then the idea was to have like pantry items. Some of these things may be something like, say, for example, fresh basil. Maybe the fresh basil is just actually, well, you don't need to buy some basil leaves. Maybe you've just got a plant on the windowsill that you just pull some leaves off of, and that's what you use. So there's the idea of it was to have something that you could say, I've got these things and I don't need to buy them each time. But I haven't. That's as far as I've got on it.
Yeah,
I've stopped. So I started getting paid. So this was just kind of me experimenting with different things, and it's something that I'm interested in, and what I'm taking it as, right, okay, let's try different ways of creating things to see what happens, to see whether this is a good way of creating an application or a bad way of creating an application. It got to a certain point. It's not too bad, but it needs some work on it. But yeah, so that was.
Thank you, Simon. So I see that you work on some deep projects which take long-term projects that you understand a lot about nutrition. So I like nutrition a lot, and all this. I have books about nutrition, and there is a lot of information about nutrition in the Michael Greger nutritional facts that I have also. So
you have it all there available right at your fingertips.
These are the books of Michael Greger.
Yeah, How Not to Die.
And this,
yeah.
And also this one, How Not to Die, by Michael Greger. And if you know, I think that are quite popular.
Yeah. And do you know the China study as well?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So those are the sort of the books that I've looked at on those.
I think that we will dedicate our next episode on nutrition, right?
Yeah, okay.
So thank you a lot for being my guest, and I will put all my best efforts to make it as palatable, as interesting as possible for the podcast, and we'll share with you. And I'll thank you once again for this.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for having me.